Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you so much for joining today's ACLU Town Hall. I'm AJ Hikes, I use they, them pronouns, and I'm your Deputy Executive Director for Strategy and Culture at the ACLU. I'm going to be moderating today's discussion. My friends, it has only been 2 weeks since Donald Trump was inaugurated as president, and it has felt like a year. The ACLU is actively tracking 45 cruel and baseless executive orders that implicate our civil rights and civil liberties, including attacks on immigration and asylum, trans rights, the core principles of diversity, equity, inclusion, and so much more. The past 2 weeks have been grueling. We knew this administration was going to come for our rights on day one, but it doesn't make the pain of this moment any less real for us. But y'all already know what I always say. The ACLU ain't got to get ready because what? Because we stay ready. And we are here to tell you that the ACLU is already fighting back. We're already putting into action our robust plan to protect our rights. Only 2 weeks into the Trump presidency, and we have already filed 5 legal actions, and we are ready for more. I saw one of our supporters just the other day comment on social media, the devil works hard, but the ACLU works harder. And I know that's right. But let me put y'all into context with this. The ACLU has 550 attorneys nationwide, 2,200 staff in every single state, DC, and Puerto Rico. And we are working in coalition to defend our rights. That's the benefit of supporting a nationwide organization like ours, our scale, and of course, our might. But let's be honest and real about what we're up against. We are still, with all of that force, we are still the David to the government's Goliath, right? Just to put it into a little bit of context for you all, the Department of Justice has over 100,000 attorneys and special agents alone. So with odds like these, this is an all hands on deck mission. We are deploying every single ACLU national staff member, every single person in our state affiliates, every board member, every single ACLU supporter. That's all of y'all. It is a full court press, my friends, all hands on deck. And so that's where you come in. That's exactly why you're here right now. We had over 15,000 people RSVP for this town hall. And so we are welcoming the flood of volunteers that we have in this fight. We are so very grateful for all the financial support that you all have given to resource this fight. We're going to need every single little bit of it. We need everyone in this resilient community with us. So that being said, I know y'all have some folks that need to be on this call that aren't here yet. Shoot them a text, forward them an email. Maybe don't send a carrier pigeon. We needed to get there faster than that, but tell them to get on right now. So if you're anything like me, you know that since the election and certainly since the inauguration, we've seen the levels of hateful messages, the vitriol, the kind of trolling on social media at an all-time high. I've seen it. I know y'all have too. But in this space, y'all have found the resistance. You found the antidote. You are with the ones who are saying, not on our watch. Not on our watch are you going to be scapegoating immigrants. Not on our watch are you going to be scapegoating people of color, trans folks. Are you going to be scapegoating DEI? So we invite you all to flood the comments. Flood the comments with encouraging words for yourselves and for our ACLU heroes who are really on the front lines of this. Not on our watch. We will resist. We are in this together. And of course, they got to get past us first. And as we transition into our first guest, I want to share some powerful words with y'all today that were actually penned by my good friend and ACLU colleague, Chase Strangio, who is with us today. In a recent op-ed for Time magazine, Chase wrote, "There's a sense that President Donald Trump is going to face less resistance during his second term, that activists are tired, and that the country is complacent. I cannot speak for others, but I can say for myself and those around me, we are bracing ourselves with eyes wide open, measured, strategic, and ready to fight." I know that's right, Chase. I know that's right. I could not agree more. The ACLU is ready. So over the next hour, my friends, we are going to share our legal and political insights into the administration's early attacks on civil liberties in these first 2 weeks. We're going to share, of course, how the ACLU is actively responding to defend our rights. And most importantly, we are going to give you those immediate actions you need in order to make a difference. We've been fielding all your questions and comments, and we're ready to break it all down. We got a lot to cover today, so let's dive right in. Now, We are going to start right at the top with our fearless leader, the person who has led the ACLU for 23 years. It'll be 24 this year. The ACLU's National Executive Director, Anthony Romero. And we are also going to bring in the powerhouse, our National Legal Director, Cecillia Wang. Hi, friends. Good to see y'all.
Hello, hello, AJ.
Good
All
to see
right.
you.
Now, hi, Celia. Anthony, I'm going to start with you.
Okay,
On our last town hall, right after the election, after you kind of famously pinned that iconic New York Times ad that's still on my desk that declared, "We ain't moving to Canada."
we're not moving to Canada.
You're damn right about that.
No
You,
offense to the Canadians on the call, but
no
we're
shade,
staying
Canadians.
put.
We're going to
We're
stay right
staying
here.
put.
We are staying put. You talked about the ACLU's preparedness to defend our rights under a second Trump administration, one that's bolder, one that's more experienced, one that's already kind of cased the joint and is more organized. So I'm curious, how does what we're facing compare to what we expected and what we planned for?
So great, and thank you, AJ, for anchoring this town hall for everybody. And I want to say, everybody who joined, there are 15,000 of you who RSVP'd. Thank you for your time. The most precious resource you have is of your time. So when you decide to give your time to us, give your energy, give your heart, give your soul to this cause, it is deeply, deeply appreciated. I mentioned at the last town hall, and AJ was just referencing, that we have spent hundreds of staff hours preparing for the Trump administration, even before the election. And certainly we kind of redoubled those efforts after we knew he would be the president on January 20th. We studied the proposals from Project 2025 from the Heritage Foundation. You all will remember that President Trump had endeavored to disavow Project 2025, saying that he didn't know anything about that. Clearly, as we see their executive orders and their proposals become a reality, we can see he was dissembling to the American public. And in that time, we did more than just admire the problem, though. That's what you expect from an advocacy group like ours, a litigation advocacy group. We don't just break it down and analyze it. We're not just pundits. We develop plans. We develop strategies and tactics. We begin to figure out how to implement the responses so that we can move the ball forward. We can play aggressive defense and offense. And that level of preparation paid off. AJ mentioned that we have 5 active lawsuits already challenging the Trump administration's work. I know there are a couple of other that are in the pike. I think we have the largest docket of all the other organizations out there. There are other really important lawsuits brought by other really important organizations. No one can do this alone. So it's important that we divide and conquer and that we do this work in concert with other groups. But of our 5, I'm very proud of the work that went into preparing them beforehand. Probably the one, I just want to say a couple words, AJ, if I could, about the one that's probably the most significant for me was the first one we filed, challenging the birthright citizenship executive order. We filed that suit 2 hours after President Trump signed it into existence. That was still on the first day, Martin Luther King Day. And my colleagues were off to the races and had already identified plaintiffs and clients, the venue, the legal arguments. And as soon as we could read that executive order for ourselves and realize that they were endeavoring to turn back birthright citizenship, we were able to file immediately. My colleague, Cecillia Wang, will talk more about the litigation. But I just want to say the reason why that EO in particular stands out for me is that birthright citizenship is it's sacred ground for those of us who work on civil rights. It is the way in which we made citizens out of the children of slaves. It's how we fixed America's original sin of chattel slavery and made us all equal under the law. The 14th Amendment and birthright citizenship were the great equalizers in this country. And so also in a nation of immigrants, it's also how we ensured that we would all be equal in this great democracy. And to undo it is not just trampling on that sacred ground of civil rights, but it's also a way to try to put in place a legal vehicle that would serve for transmitting intergenerational stigma and discrimination. Just imagine if they were able to kind of create different classes of people in America, and that we're not all created equal, that we're not all citizens by our birth. And, so I'm going to just go out on a limb and say they are not going to succeed. They're not going to win on this one. This one, I am willing to bet money. I'm saying it on YouTube. There is no way that I think we lose this case, even with this Supreme Court. Cecillia will talk to you more about how we view the court and litigation. But then why did they do it? Why did they try to, one of the first actions be a repeal of birthright citizenship? I think it was to demonstrate that they really were going to kind of move as aggressively down the field as they could. And to show that they really meant business in a way to kind of undo even that which we thought could never be undone. And so I think it's an illustrative of just how the second Trump administration is nothing like the first. They're better prepared. They're faster off the block. There's ideological alignment among the Trump administration officials. They are endeavoring to do as much of their radical plan that you saw in Project 2025 as we allow them to, And I think part of what I just wanted to underscore for our folks is that we have to play the long game, that the abuses of these policies will ultimately, when people realize it and see it and recognize it for what it is, it will turn public opinion. I know for many folks, including people around me, people in the organization and my friends and family, we feel a little bit of out of sorts because public opinion doesn't seem to be with us on immigrants' rights or transgender rights or racial justice or DEI. And I just say we have to play the long game, and that public opinion will harvest to our advantage, just like we saw after 9/11. I mean, you were mentioning, AJ, I've been here 23 years. I started the week before 9/11. The Patriot Act was a very popular law when it got signed into existence. There were lots of Democrats. Only one Democrat voted against the Patriot Act. And even liberals, people even at NPR, I remember having this enormous argument with an NPR reporter. We're saying we need to stand behind the president. We need to fight the war on terror. We need to do what we need to do to make sure America doesn't get attacked again. And we played the long game. And as the public saw the violations that were endemic in the Patriot Act, as people saw the pictures of Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo and rendition and torture, as people saw that we were deporting good people who were South Asians and who were Muslims and Arabs for no reason other than they were than their ethnicity or their religion, that we harvested that public opinion. And ultimately, the Patriot Act and the war on terror became radioactive. And so we have to stay like water on stone, making our arguments both in court, in Congress, in the court of public opinion. And we need to make sure that we resist those worst elements of the Trump administration. And they're testing boundaries. It's a trial balloon. If there had not been a lawsuit within 2 hours of the birthright citizenship executive order, that would have told them, we can push this even harder than we thought. Right. And so part of this is making sure that there is that level of resistance and that we're able to resist them in real time. And this is going to be a long 4 years. We should not cede an inch of any ground without a pitched battle. And we're going to do it through litigation, through lobbying, through advocacy and organizing. So that's more than my part, AJ. I'm sorry. Wind me up. I can't really stop.
Can't stop you. That's all right. That's what we needed to hear, though. I appreciate what you were saying, though, Anthony. 2 hours after it was signed, the ink wasn't dry, and we were first out the gate with the challenge around birthright citizenship. They may be fast off the block, but we are faster. And you're absolutely right. This is sacred ground in terms of our Constitution. Cecillia, I got to pivot to you because Anthony teed us up talking about some of the immigration battles we're looking at, but there really is a theme in terms of the Trump administration's first attacks. Who are they targeting and why? Can you kind of give us a little bit of an overview here and help us see some of these themes?
Sure, AJ. So I think Anthony already described the ways in which the Trump administration and Donald Trump personally are scapegoating small minority groups who he thinks are politically unpopular. And so he thinks that he can rile up his base by scapegoating trans youth, by scapegoating immigrants. These are people who belong to the ACLU, people who we stand with, who don't have the right to vote, right? And that's deliberate on Trump's part. I sat down on day 3 of the Trump administration to read all of the executive orders that he had issued to that point. And I think what became very clear is that Donald Trump, through this set of 45 or so executive orders, is painting a disturbing vision, his vision for our country. It's a vision where his preferred people, a small segment of the American population, are preferred, and he excludes and attacks the people that he does not prefer. Through those executive orders, what is he doing? Number one, he is taking us back to pre-Reconstruction times and is attacking the first Reconstruction. With birthright citizenship, one of the fruits of the Civil War, the paroxysm that the United States went through and the end of slavery, the key and foundational idea that everyone born in the United States is a US citizen. He's attacking that, and that is attack on Reconstruction. What else is he doing? He is attacking ideas of inclusion and anti-discrimination and equality in our country. And there he's attacking the second Reconstruction, the fruits of the civil rights movement, the Black-led civil rights movement that led to things like Lyndon Johnson's 1965 executive order that sought to uproot a history of racism in the federal contracting system. Trump undid that order. He rescinded Johnson's order. So I think if you look across what Trump is doing and who he's targeting and who his administration is targeting, they're betting that the majority of Americans are going to be with him. And we're taking the opposite bet. And I know that we are going to win that bet. When he comes after minorities, when he goes after fundamental principles of inclusion, of equality, the principles of the Reconstruction and the second Reconstruction, we are not only going to beat him and make sure that his vision does not come to pass, but we are going to make real our vision for America, which is inclusive, in which the rights of equality and freedom and justice prevail for everyone.
Thank you so much for that, Cecillia. I really appreciate that we're also just going to call this what it is. These attacks are racist. They're transphobic. They represent a white nationalist view of our country, and we will not allow it. Again, not on our watch. Cecillia, I'm actually going to keep you here just for a moment, and I'm going to re-up something that we talked about in November. I know that during the first Trump administration, we filed over 430 legal actions that were challenging unconstitutional and unlawful policies. Over 430. Say all the time, we're not new to this, we're true to this. So can you tell me, do you think we can still count on the courts to stop or stall the worst of the administration's harmful actions?
Yes, I think it's important to put litigation in context in the battles that we're already waging against this federal government under President Donald Trump. In the last Trump administration, we filed, as you said, or took over 400 legal actions, including the key litigation that went after his major policies. This is a smaller number of lawsuits, but they were the ones that really mattered in that we were knocking out the fundamental building blocks that he's using in order to go after liberty and equality and all of the principles that I just talked about. So in short, I think that we will be able to use litigation as a tool to stop Donald Trump. As I always say, when your house is on fire, there are lots of things you need to do to talk about why it is that the fire happened. But the first thing you need to do is try to put out the fire. And often going to court and getting an immediate stop to the unlawful government action is the tool you reach for first, among others. And we've already seen that in the lawsuits that we have filed and lawsuits that other partners, including states and localities, cities across the country, judges are stepping up to stop the Trump administration from taking these extreme actions that violate people's rights. We've seen that already with a Republican-appointed district judge in Seattle, Judge Kuhnauer, issuing a temporary restraining order to stop the birthright citizenship order that Donald Trump issued. And I think we're going to continue to see courts stand as a bulwark against illegal federal action.
Thanks, Cecillia. All right, Anthony, I'm coming to you very quickly, and then I'm going to move to some of our other colleagues. Just want to ask you, because I hear a lot of conversations around the concerns about really abuse of power. And so what we're looking at is Trump trying to intimidate political opponents who stand in the way of his agenda with different threats of retribution and defunding. Are there teeth behind these threats? And how can we help make sure that he doesn't abuse his position of power to trample on our rights?
Well, I believe the threats to be real, and I think we should take them at their word. I also think we can fight them. There'll be a number of efforts, I think, that will be done by us and by other groups that will do their best to stand up a defense against these threats and the abuse of power that we're seeing play out. I think, there's great litigation done by a lot of groups, other groups other than us. I love this. I love the lawsuit today by the FBI agents against the government. It was like, I loved it. I utterly loved it. So I will just say that one of the places where we can make a real difference is to play on the issues around the states' rights and our system of federalism in this country. It's going to be an enormous frustration to Donald Trump and his cronies. They're not going to be able to run the government like they run their corporations with their A-class shares and votes. The Constitution and the system of checks and balances puts in place some real checks on the federal government's power. For instance, you can't just order the states and the cities to do your bidding when you're in the federal government. And so he's going to try to kind of bury them with threats of retribution. He's going to try to cut off their funding. He's going to say that they are obstructing his efforts, that they don't voluntarily cooperate. And we've done a whole bunch of legal analysis and working with state attorney generals to make sure that they are launching their arguments to contest that effort to usurp federal power and step on state power. Beyond the litigation and beyond the work of lawyers, we're also deploying our members, and you'll hear about this later on in the rest of the program. I think one of the things that's so remarkable about this organization is that we actually have card-carrying members, rank and file people who can actually get into the fight with us. We can't do it alone. And so the idea that when they try to shut down the funding for a lot of these programs across the country, and another group brought litigation to freeze the defunding efforts, we contacted thousands of our members to swarm the phones of House Republicans, jam them up, jack them up, especially the ones in vulnerable districts where they're counting the numbers and counting the votes very closely because they worry about that might be in peril's way when they have to come up for re-election. So to use the power of the membership to make sure that those voices are heard are going to be critical. And we have a whole bunch of other ways that I think will be exceptional for making sure that we stand up as rigorous a response to these threats of intimidation and retaliation.
We can never forget the power of the people. Thank you so much, Cecillia and Anthony. I really appreciate your defiance, your faith in our ability to fight back. I want to remind folks that part of the strategy, their strategy, is to flood the zone, right? They want to overwhelm, they want to confuse, they want to distract with just the sheer volume of attacks. But we are not fazed here. We are clear-eyed, we are focused. And so remember that we're also not just fighting against them, we're fighting for us. We're fighting for our vision of America. And there is such great strength and power in our ACLU community. So at the center of our fight right now is our defense of immigrant communities. And so I want to dig in a little bit more to this work together. So Anthony, don't go anywhere. I'm going to pull you back in later. Cecillia, you stay right where you are. Within hours of Trump taking office, we saw just so many executive orders, directives that were filled with extreme anti-immigrant, racist hatred that threatens to tear families and communities apart. I want to bring in Cecillia and Naureen Shah, my colleague, who is going to discuss our response plans. Naureen is our Deputy Director of Government Affairs for the ACLU's Equality Division. So glad you're here with us today, Naureen. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Now, Naureen, I'll start with you. Before Cecillia outlines our legal actions, I want you to help us combat the Trump administration's narrative of hate and fear and vitriol. For example, and I kind of shudder to even repeat this, but Trump referred to immigrants as criminals and animals and said that they're, I quote, poisoning the blood of our country. Now, as I say that, I want to be clear. We all know white supremacist talking points when we hear them. So we're going to name it and call it out for what it is. But more importantly, what is our counter narrative? How can we navigate conversations about immigrants' rights?
Yeah, every time I hear that quote, I have this visceral reaction. It is so painful to hear somebody say it. It's so painful to hear the president say it. And I think what's even harder is that we aren't just hearing it on the news. Sometimes we're hearing it from our loved ones, from our neighbors, and we're worried it's what people are thinking, people who are even close to us. And that is so hard. And what I remind myself is that that is a part of our nation, that ugliness is a part of our history. That's not all of us. That's not all of our history. There is more to us than that. And I try to remind myself of the deep history in this country of charity, of a sense of shared humanity, and think all the way back to the 1980s. In this country, that's when we say the sanctuary movement was born. And what was that? That was ordinary Americans opening their hearts, opening their arms and their doors to people who were fleeing Central America because they saw people being gunned down in protests. They saw doctors, lawyers, journalists having to run for their lives. And when a young woman would show up in an Arizona desert with her toddler, there were people who were there to welcome her and say, you have a safe place here. You have a safe place with our church. You have a safe place in our community. And that is the root of our tradition, a recent tradition in this country of welcoming the stranger, of embracing the vulnerable. That is a part of who we are. And it's a part that we have to hold on to and remember in a moment like this, when we feel like we're surrounded by the ugliness. That's not true. I look at my own neighborhood email listserv, and there's people saying, hey, does anybody have a mattress? I've got a family here that needs one. They're refugees. Does anybody have a bike? There's some kids who want to learn how to ride one. Can anyone help them learn how? That's part of who we are. So when we talk about it, when we talk about the hate, we start from a place of, there's hate and there's also a lot of love and a lot of recognition of the need for compassion in this moment. The hard part of it is that the Trump administration has told people, hey, they're helping immigrants instead of helping you. The reason they don't have money to help you, the reason your school's all filled up is because they're helping the immigrants. And that is a really hard thing for people to hear. And they've been hearing it over and over again on Fox News. They've been hearing it so much more than they've been hearing those stories about compassion and charity. So we have to bring people back to, you know what? Absolutely, the government is accountable to all of us. We should all have a standard of living that we can actually all thrive in. The government needs to provide services, but it's not us against them. It's us, the people. The government has to be accountable to we, the people, all of us. And we're all in this together in a struggle to make good on this American promise of a good economy, a strong country that helps us all thrive. And so that's where I think we take it back to, AJ.
Welcoming the stranger, embracing the vulnerable, that is who we are, not this hate that we're seeing. Thank you for that reminder, Naureen. Cecillia, you talked earlier about our lawsuit challenging the Trump administration's executive order that was targeting birthright citizenship, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. The ACLU legal department, as you referred to them in an internal call just last week, is in beast mode, and you were the captain of that team. So can you tell us about some of the other legal actions the ACLU has taken in responding to the administration's attacks on immigrants and asylum seekers?
Sure. It's interesting hearing Naureen talk about the reality of our families and our communities around the country and the US and all the reasons why Americans are not going to stand for the scapegoating. But there are other reasons that I think come to the fore when it comes to our litigation on behalf of immigrants. And that's the principle that the government should not abuse its power, should not bypass the protections of the Constitution, including the Due Process Clause. And these are things that appeal to a wide variety of Americans, whether or not they have immigrants in their families or they care about immigrants as a community. So let's talk about the litigation that we've already brought to challenge the Trump administration's actions on immigration. And then I can talk about some late breaking things that are in the works. So we've already taken 4 major actions to challenge the Trump administration's immigration orders. Anthony started off talking about his attack on birthright citizenship and our day 1 lawsuit. Within 2 hours of that executive order, we filed in the New Hampshire federal court to challenge that. The second thing we did on day 1 of the Trump administration was to raise an issue with the Trump administration's termination of a phone app called CBP-1. What is CBP-1? Well, under Biden administration policies, starting in June 2024, it was the last remaining way for a person arriving at the US-Mexico border to apply for asylum in the United States. When the Biden administration cut off all the other ways that people could apply for asylum and said, you can only apply using this phone app by getting one of a very limited number of appointments that are available, we brought a lawsuit against the Biden administration. Well, the Trump administration came in on day 1 and eliminated CBP-1. The New York Times reported that people who had been waiting for months for their turn through the CBP-1 asylum application process arrived at the border and were turned away. They were told, we are not doing these appointments any longer. So we immediately went into federal court in the District of Columbia in order to tell the court there, the only leg that the federal government had to stand on with CBP-1 has now been taken away. And you need to strike down this policy because it violates the fundamental right to asylum and the Due Process Clause. The third action that we've taken already against the Trump administration on immigration is a challenge to something called expedited removal. Expedited removal is a shortcut system that bypasses immigration courts and has been used since it was authorized by Congress in 1996 only to bypass the immigration courts for people who are encountered by government agents near the US border on the theory that they have just arrived in the country. Donald Trump has issued an order that expands expedited removal throughout the country and would apply it to anyone arrested anywhere in the United States who can't prove that they've been in the country for more than 2 years. It's a gross expansion of this kangaroo court system of deportation that bypasses the immigration courts. And we challenged that on day 3 of the Trump administration on January 22nd. And fourth, hot off the presses, our most recent immigration case against Trump is a challenge to Trump's extreme ban on the entry of non-citizens into the United States at the southern border. He is using a statute called Section 212F of the Immigration and Nationality Act. This is the same statute he used for the Muslim ban, all 3 versions of it. And he's now claiming that there is an active, and I quote, invasion at the southern border of the United States, and that in order to repel that invasion, and let's be clear, he's talking about families seeking asylum at the southern border, that he's going to repel that so-called invasion by invoking Section 212F to completely shut down immigration at the southern border. We filed that suit just yesterday. There are numerous other cases to be filed soon, even as we're talking. On this call, Trump has announced that he is starting flights to Guantanamo in order to detain people that he's trying to put in deportation proceedings at Guantanamo. We're looking at that very hard and preparing for litigation there. And he's invoking other statutory authorities in an extreme way that no president has ever done and we'll be looking to challenge him every step of the way.
Thank you again for that overview, Cecillia. Y'all heard it here. We are here at every single turn. There are more legal actions that are coming because not on our watch. Thank you so much, Cecillia and Naureen. I know that we've all been feeling outraged by these anti-immigrant attacks from the Trump administration, but my friends, we are turning this anger into action, and we're fighting back with the full firepower of the ACLU. Y'all see how we do. We're not just talking about it, we're going to be about it every single time. So I know I'm hearing that you all are flooding the comments on YouTube asking, what can you do? How can you get involved? You're eager to fight back with us too. I got you. I got you. If you haven't already, please, please, please join People Power. People Power is the ACLU's platform for our grassroots action, right? Not all of us are attorneys, not all of us are litigators, not one here, but we can all be activists, we can all be advocates, we can be organizers. So our volunteer teams help mobilize and organize our communities all around the country to defend our civil liberties by making calls, sending texts, writing letters. You can sign up today to join one of our many volunteer teams, and you're going to get an email with steps to take about how to get started. So I'm inviting you to please join People Power. You can go to aclu.org/join People Power. When we say not on our watch, this is what we're talking about. The power is with the people. And just in a moment, I'm going to bring our National Organizing Director to share some more information about our Know Your Rights trainings. So if you really want to roll up your sleeves and get down with us, that's how you're going to do it. Because I know y'all want to help. I see that that is like the biggest question that folks have. So you say you want to be about it, we're going to put you to work. Now, these attacks on immigrants are attacks on all of us, and so we have to remain united in this fight. I'm going to come back to Naureen in a couple of minutes so that we can talk about the ways that we can put pressure on Congress, on state legislators, on city officials to protect our immigrant communities and say not on our watch. But I want to make sure we have some space to discuss the Trump administration's political scapegoating of trans and non-binary people. I also know y'all are flooding the comments on YouTube asking about when we are going to talk about trans justice, and baby, it is time. I am going to bring in the Chase Strangio, our co-director of the ACLU's LGBTQ and HIV project, to talk to us about what's happening. And as a point of personal privilege, it is a great honor to be in space with my friend Chase. As you all know, in December, Chase became the first out trans attorney to argue before the Supreme Court of the United States. Chase is going to yell at me, but make it rain in the comments for this powerhouse that is Chase Strangio. Chase.
Get out of here.
You know what? We're on computer screens right now, so you can't fight me. Let's start, Chase. Let's start. Let's get serious. Let's start with that inauguration speech. You and I both saw it. When Trump said, as of today, it will henceforth be official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female. I'm going to say this with my whole entire chest. There has never been, and there will never, ever, ever be a world where trans and non-binary people don't exist. We are here and we are not going anywhere. And I know you know that, Chase. So, with these executive orders that have been targeting trans people, an executive order banning them from the military, another requiring federal agencies to discriminate against trans people, denying who they are, threatening their freedom of self-determination and self-expression, and then most recently, one that attacks gender-affirming care for trans youth. All of these are horrific. But for those of us who are raising and caring for trans and non-binary young people, that last one is especially gutting and terrifying. It has been a lot. In the face of all of this, my friend, I'm going to ask you the question that everyone wants to know. What the hell is going on? Can you break down this avalanche of attacks? And most importantly, how is the ACLU responding?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you all for being here. Thank you, AJ. I'm inspired listening to all of you. And at the end of the day, what we're going to talk about is demoralizing, but when we come together, we are inspiring in our collective power. And so that's what this is about. And it has been a brutal 2 weeks, 2 years, however long it's been since January 20th for trans and non-binary people. And what we're seeing from the Trump administration, just like what we're hearing about the ways in which immigrants are being attacked, we have an administration that is using rhetorical attacks on transgender people in order to expand executive power and open up a series of attacks that are going to affect all of us. So we need to remain vigilant as to what's going on. But over the last 2 weeks, what we have seen in terms of what the president has said and what he has done is, in essence, a pronouncement from the federal government that it is the position of the United States government that transgender people do not exist and that we are inherently fraudulent. Now, we do exist. We are not fraudulent, but these are very demoralizing and upsetting words, especially for trans young people, non-binary young people, and the parents who love them. Now, practically speaking, what has that meant? That has meant 9 executive actions targeting transgender people that have limited the ability of transgender people to access identification, including passports, green cards, and other federal identification. The president has directed federal agencies to take away healthcare from trans people incarcerated in federal facilities, has instructed the Office of Personnel Management to deny federal employees access to restrooms, has directed the military services to expel the thousands of trans service members serving their country openly in reliance on prior federal policy from the military, has instructed that agencies should threaten to withdraw federal funding from schools that support trans students, and has threatened federal funding to institutions that provide gender-affirming medical care for trans adolescents. As a whole, this is a wholesale assault on transgender people's ability to live freely and safely in this country. And we are treating it as the existential crisis that it is for our communities, which means we are fighting back with everything that we have. Today, we filed a lawsuit in federal court challenging President Trump's unlawful executive order threatening federal funding to institutions that provide medical care to transgender individuals under the age of 19. What the president has threatened to do is, in essence, punish any medical institution by withdrawing all of its federal funding if it treats transgender people under 19 with necessary medical care. In other words, the federal government is threatening to shut down our nation's children's hospitals if they provide the healthcare that trans people need, that their doctors have decided is medically necessary for them. And they are doing this with such base cruelty. And so we are in federal court arguing that this is just beyond the scope of the president's power. Congress, it has the power of the purse. They authorize funds. The president cannot unilaterally decide not to allow those funds to go to the state simply because he does not like the way they are being spent. That is an abuse of his power, and we are suing over that, as well as the violation of the individual constitutional rights of transgender people and their parents. And I just want to say that if the president can get away with doing this to trans people, if the president can get away with doing this to immigrants, then he can do it to all of us. And so we have to stand in line together to hold back these fights. And that is precisely what we're doing in federal court today on behalf of trans youth. And we will be there again shortly.
Yes, you all heard it here first. There is a lawsuit that we filed today challenging this assault on the healthcare for trans and non-binary youth. This is an abuse of the president's power. And it is not just about trans and non-binary young people. If he comes for them, he's coming for all of us next. Thank you so much for outlining that, Chase. One last quick thing I want to get from you before I shift. Is there any kind of guidance you can give us for how we should be effectively combating some of these dangerous and misleading narratives, specifically about the existence of trans and non-binary people just being essentially a lie and inherently fraudulent?
Yeah, what I want to see from everyone is an acknowledgement that we have the power to disrupt these narratives. The president's day one executive order targeting transgender people claimed it was defending women. It was doing the opposite. It was harming all women. It was opening the door to the erosions into all of our bodily autonomy. And we need to act collectively with that urgency in all aspects of our lives. State legislatures are in session. School boards are out here targeting trans people, but they're doing so that they can come for all of us. And so we need to be organized together in all of those spaces. And so I'll see you all out there.
Damn right. Thank you, Chase. Let's make it very, very, very crystal clear to everybody. The ACLU will never, ever, ever stop fighting for our trans and non-binary siblings. Our country, our communities depend on the freedom of all people to live free without fear and joy. And so As I said earlier, and as Chase also said, a threat against one group is a threat against all of us. So we have to continue pushing back. It's going to take all of us. So with that, it leads me into the next part of our town hall. How can you fuel this fight? Naureen, I'm going to bring you back now to talk about our advocacy work. Everyone wants to know. We've been talking about the power of the litigation, but in the past 2 weeks, we've also really flexed our political advocacy muscle. Let's talk about how critical this nationwide work is and how we're fighting for our rights and the rights of those who are being targeted.
Yeah, absolutely, AJ. It's such an important part of this fight. We need Congress to mobilize, and we need our state and local governments to mobilize to protect our rights, to push back on this abuse of power and this attempt to get us all to just go along with the Trump agenda. I'm on Capitol Hill a lot of days this week, a lot of days last week, and I'm up there talking to members of Congress, talking to our senators and our House members, and saying, "Hey, what are you going to do to stand up for your constituents?" And I'm frustrated. I know many of you are frustrated that so many members of Congress have had a kind of deer in headlights approach, a moment of seeming to be just wringing their hands and not acting. But I can already tell that that is changing. And that's changing because people like you are picking up the phone, flooding the phone lines of members of Congress. They are hearing from you, and they know that they have to get their acts together and actually start responding. And we're seeing that. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar of Minnesota was out there advising her constituents and their family members of their rights and saying, here's what your constitutional rights are. Here's what to do if immigration enforcement shows up. And unfortunately, what we saw was that then Elon Musk went after her and said she was breaking the law. And we even just saw an hour ago another member of Congress calling for Ilhan Omar, the congresswoman from Minnesota, to be deported to Somalia. Of course, she can't be deported. She's a citizen and she's a sitting member of Congress. And that just shows the gravity of this moment where the Trump administration and its congressional allies want us to capitulate. They want Congress to go along with it. And I've been starting to say to people, for them, the capitulation is the point. They want to intimidate people into going along with it. And they're doing it with Congress. They're doing it here in Washington, D.C., which is where I am. But I also had the opportunity this summer to travel around the country and to really see the power of the ACLU in changing all of that, changing that from the ground up when state and local officials started to come together and have conversations with our ACLU affiliates in every state, conversations about how they would fight back, how they would prepare to protect their residents. And we had a project called Firewall for Freedom that was really just this, how our state and local officials going to create a firewall, a wall to stop the spread of the fire of the Trump administration's attacks on civil rights. And we are seeing in so many states this firewall being built because of our supporters calling on their state and local officials, their governors, their state attorneys general, their legislatures to act and protect them from the Trump administration's attacks. We're starting to see that state and local officials are coming out and saying, you know what, we're going to push back on what the Trump administration is trying to do. And when Trump and his weaponized Department of Justice and FBI come for trans students, when they come for immigrants, when they come for all of us, our state and local governments are saying, actually, we're not going to take any part in it. And we're going to stand alongside and help protect these communities. And that is so important. I think it's such a tribute to the power of you all as ACLU supporters that in every state, we can mobilize and we can get state and local officials to stand up. And when they do, they're also motivating people back here in DC to say, oh, if they're doing it in Illinois or Minnesota, we better have it back here in DC. And I think that's the story, how we'll win and really push back on the second wave from the Trump administration.
Thank you so much, Naureen. It is so inspiring to hear about all the ways that we're taking action, and we are just getting started. I'm also really happy to bring John Gilbert to fire us all up. John is our ACLU National Organizing Director, and like Naureen, he is here to share an important reminder about how we must use our voices, our power, our privilege to fight for our rights. We simply cannot give up. We can't sit on the sidelines. We got to show up. So, John, this is such an important part of our democracy. Beyond the courts, beyond the state houses, we have the streets. Beyond our political power, we have people power. And the power of the people is clearly alive and well. So that's where we come in. conversation. Let's talk more about grassroots mobilization here and the role that we play. And of course, when I'm saying we, I am talking about all of us who are on this town hall and beyond. So John, tell us more about what we can do right now. Many of the folks watching are ready to be put to work today, and we're ready for them.
Great. Thank you so much, AJ. And thanks to all of you for being here. I know we have a lot of folks on this call. I know some of you are already active with us and already coming to our events and hitting the phones. And to you, I say thank you. Really appreciate it. See you at the next thing. But I do want to talk largely to that audience that AJ was citing, that group of folks that's looking for what to do and trying to figure out, how to plug in, how to get involved. I certainly understand, in this time, just a couple weeks in, the feelings of hate and chaos that we're sort of seeing that are really intentional and designed to promote paralysis, frankly, and a feeling of I'm just going to sit back because what can I do or how can I get involved? And I just want to speak directly to that and say we have so many people who are finding their way to us. We know we're going to grow so much bigger, and there is no time like the present for you to get involved right now. For new folks, I would say the first thing you can do right off the bat is come to a Know Your Rights training. You can see right above me, aclu.org/KYR training. Let me say more about what this is. These are trainings that are focused on the rights of individuals, whether you are protesting, whether you are supporting someone whose rights may be in danger, whether you are someone that law enforcement is talking to, and the questions of what your rights as a citizen are so relevant. We are doing these twice a month. The last one we did, we had almost 3,000 people. We have to keep getting new Zooms with new cap rooms and adding more translators of different kinds to accommodate the growing crowd. We'll be so excited to see you at our next one on February 10th. On February 13th, we have our next action meeting. We're going to be talking about all the different ways to get involved locally, nationally, everything in between, and just continuing on like this at the national level every month. The reason why I'm emphasizing the trainings is first, yes, it's great to go and get that content, to have that understanding, to be able to pass that information along in your community. You'll learn something too, even if you've done this before. There's obviously so many angles and nuances to this stuff that our folks are so good at conveying. But beyond that, this is the beginning of a conversation. And once you come to the training, we can start to work with you to figure out, okay, do you want to make phone calls to supporters in states that we know we're going to have mass raids that we need to respond to rally the troops and get folks out so that we can be there in force? Great. We have a place for you. Do you want to call your congressperson because it should be politically inconvenient and uncomfortable to support these Trump policies? Absolutely. There's a space for you. Do you want to get connected to your local affiliate, plug into the local coalitions and add the specific set of skills you have to that process? Great. There's a home for you. Full-time, part-time, old, young. There is a home for everyone because it's going to take the entire community to push back on something like this in order for us to really have meaningful and lasting success. So it all starts with come to a training. Go to the link above my head. Go to the training. Let us send you some Know Your Rights cards. Be in community. Have a good time. And we'll take things from there. Excited to see y'all out there.
That's what I'm talking about, John. Thank you. We got it all for y'all. What we can do right now, what we can do moving forward, some defense, some offense. Many of y'all are ready to be put to work right now, and we're ready to go. We're ready for you, as John said. So please, you heard it here. You've got your marching orders. Go take action. Speaking of taking action, I just have to do this. Last month, the ACLU celebrated its 105th anniversary. And I don't know, y'all, if I do say so myself, we're looking pretty damn good for 105. We started as a small band of change makers who were committed to the principles of justice and equality, and we are now a powerful force. Millions of supporters, activists, volunteers all around the country. We would not be able to carry out any of this essential work that you have heard about during this town hall without those of you who are watching. Your engagement, your support, your energy, which is just flooding the comments, is providing us with the resources to stay strong in this fight and be able to react and be able to move quickly whenever the need arises. Remember those major legal actions that Cecillia was talking about in the first 2 weeks, in the birthright citizenship lawsuit within hours. All of that, we're able to move so quickly because of support from you all. So I want to give a special shout out to our Guardians of Liberty who support the ACLU with a monthly gift. It's because of those folks that we're able to prepare and take on the Trump administration like we have been. So for those of you who are tuning in, if you're not a monthly donor yet, I really hope you'll consider becoming one. It really is the most powerful thing you can do to protect and advance civil liberties now and for the road that's ahead. And as Anthony said, it's going to be a long road, but we're on the road together. So I'm going to invite you to go to aclu.org/go monthly, and that's where you can start a monthly gift today. Honey, remember, Donald Trump's got to get past us first. And this is one of the ways that we, the people, can put up that firewall for freedom that Naureen was talking about. Not on our watch. Remember, y'all, not on our watch. So before we end our town hall, I want to bring Anthony back for some quick final thoughts. Anthony, you promised the people that the ACLU would have a plan to safeguard our civil liberties under a second Trump administration. And we have shared over the past hour that we've created the plan and we have immediately put it to action. We ain't talking about it, we're being about it. And so as we wrap up the town hall and we face what lies ahead for us, what are some of the final thoughts you want to leave us with?
So this was great for me as well to kind of hear from my colleagues. You can see why I've got the easiest job in the place. When I'm surrounded by people like you just heard from, it's hard not to feel really optimistic, even in the most dire circumstances. So I'll say a couple of things. I'll say, number one, it's going to take more than just the ACLU. I need you to stick with us. AJ just told you how to become a guardian of liberty, but I need you to engage a whole cross-section of other organizations as well. It's going to take many of us to fight this onslaught. As big as we've built it, 2,200 staff, 450 of them are litigators. We're going to need our sibling organizations to do this work with alongside of us. So engage the broader ecosystem because it's going to require, we're going to have to divide and conquer. We're going to have to say, you go, we'll figure this out. We're going to have to sow the seeds of discontent and Trump land. We're going to have to pick them off one by one. You figure out whatever metaphor you want to use, but it's going to take many of us to do that work. So please do engage the broader ecosystem because it needs you. Number two, your assistance has to be more than just watching something on YouTube or sending a credit card number or a check. You've got to get engaged. This is not a moment when we could have spectators. And so like Naureen and like John mentioned for you, we can put you to work. We will put you to work. That is the power of a membership organization. And that the greatest power lies in its individual members, the several million people who comprise this great union that is the American Civil Liberties Union. I think the third thing I'll just say is that you can't despair. It's going to be hard. We're going to lose some of these. They're going to keep coming at us. The power of the federal government is enormous, as AJ mentioned in the beginning. But you got to kind of find a way to recharge and reboot and stay in the game. It's important because the issues are worth it. And, you know, I don't know. I'm going to close on a different note than I normally do. AJ knows, but I spoke at a memorial service for Cecile Richards, who was a dear friend of mine. She ran Planned Parenthood for many years. She was one of the great heroes. She was one of the people I turned to for inspiration. And as I was preparing my remarks, I tried to find a way to inspire. And I came across a poem by Maya Angelou that inspired me. And so read this, right? I mean, I know it's crazy. You know, the head of the ACLU suggesting a poem at the end of a town hall. When great trees fall. And at the end of the poem, the stanza was, because they existed, we can be and be better, for they existed. And because people like Cecile Richards and Chase Strangio and Cecillia Wang and Naureen Shah and John Gilbert and AJ Hikes existed, we can be and be better. We can be better advocates fighting for a better America. So stick with us. We need you.
What a perfect note, Anthony. I am so proud and grateful to be in this fight with you, with all of my colleagues, and everyone that is watching. Since you mentioned Ancestor Angelou, I have to say, happy Black History Month. I don't know what they're doing in some places. I don't know what they're doing in the White House, but in this house, we celebrate Black history and Black futures. And that is a history and a future that is fueled by activism, resistance, and joy. And so we invite you all in that spirit to continue to push to create a more perfect union for our communities, for our families, for those of us who are here today, and all those who are yet to come. Remember you all. They are trying to flood the zone. They are trying to overwhelm us. They are trying to confuse us, but we are clear-eyed, we are focused, and we, the people, have the power. Take the actions that we have shared with you today. Join the Know Your Rights trainings to protect immigrants and trans folks. Please sign up for People Power, our grassroots action network. Call your representatives in Congress to protect targeted communities. Lift up your voices. No one can stop us. No one can stop this movement. He's got to get past us first. And baby, we ain't going anywhere. We sure as hell ain't moving to Canada. No shade, Canadians. We are the ACLU folks, and we are not new to this. We're true to this. And so on behalf of Anthony, all of our speakers, everyone at the ACLU, I thank you so much for joining our town hall today. Thank you for your unwavering commitment, dedication, and support for this work. Stay engaged, keep fighting, take very good care of yourself and each other. Thank you.